pleasure to be here with you, and Congressman Hoekstra and Pete, it's good to see both of you all, and thanks for all of you coming out. In 1991, when I deployed to Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm as a young captain, it was the typical type of battlefield that we could understand. It was the typical type of battlefield between two different armies. I was a young captain in the 1st Infantry Division. We knew Saddam's forces were on the other side. We knew their order of battle. And we established an air campaign with shaping operations. We followed it up with decisive operations. Then 10 years later, we had this attack against our World Trade Towers, 2001. All of a sudden, we had a different shift. And what I want to talk about when you say the threat environment is the changing nature of this enemy. It's the changing nature of what Frank and I have talked about, the 21st century battlefield. Because we no longer just have modern nation states that meet you on the battlefield. Now you have a new introduced enemy that has always been an enemy that was there, but now they have a 7th century ideology with 21st century technology and resources. And what we find ourselves trying to contend with are non-state, non-uniform belligerents on the battlefield, unlawful enemy combatants that we refuse to recognize. As a matter of fact, we try to rationalize them, and we try to afford them the same type of rights and privileges that we would to a normal nation-state type of soldiers. So one of the things that we have to first and foremost do is understand this complexity of the 21st century battlefield with these non-state, non-uniform belligerents. How do we deal with them? How do we contend with them? How do we deal with Americans who will leave their own country and fly over to Syria and take up and fight with an Islamic terrorist group, basically? How do we change our visa practices? How do we, as a world, really look at how do we start to take back citizenship, and how do we deal with this? We can't deal with this in the normal ways that we have. When I sit and think about the fact that we gave 5 senior members of the enemy back to the enemy at a time when the enemy is still fighting us, that is not what you do in normal battlefield procedures. See, first and foremost, you repatriate enemy after you have whipped the enemy. You don't repatriate the enemy while you're still fighting the enemy. So it's those things we must come to understand. The other thing that is so important that we realize is that we have to move our military from what has been a forward deployed type of military. What I mean by forward deployed type of military that's stationed in Germany, stationed in Korea, stationed in Japan, because we believe we have these immense threats. This new modern 21st century battlefield, it needs us to leverage what is the greatest asset that the United States of America has, and that's our strategic maneuverability. Instead of a forward deployed military, we need to have more of a power projection military. And it's going to hurt my heart to say this, and I know my good friend Bill Chatfield here, who is a Marines Marine, is going to enjoy what I'm saying, but we have to be able to leverage our maritime platforms, to be able to have our forces in position, to be able to quickly respond and react. We should not have had a situation in Benghazi where we were told we didn't have anyone that could get there. Anytime Americans come over a radio and say we're under attack, the greatest nation in the world should have a force that is ready to respond. And if we don't have a force that's ready to respond, something is wrong about how we have established our military. The other thing that's so important, when we move away from a forward deployed military to a power projection platform military, then that means we have to move away from what I believe has been the Achilles, has been the millstone about our neck in fighting these current conflagrations. It is not about nation building. The United States military is the greatest military around, but we're not about nation building. And when you're fighting against this Islamofascism, this Islamic terrorism, the Islamism, it is about strike operations. It's about quickly being able to deploy and crush this enemy. If you go back and you look at what we were able to do in the early stages of Afghanistan in 2001, with 500 to 600 special operators, CIA operators, along with an indigenous force, the Northern Alliance, in about 90 days they crushed a 70,000-man Taliban army along with 5,000 al-Qaeda fighters. That's the model we should be using, because when the president says we should be using the model of Yemen, obviously he's not read his daily intelligence brief to let him know that Iranian-backed separatists, the al-Houthis, have taken over the Yemeni government. I don't think that's the model. As a matter of fact, we're looking to evacuate our embassy there just the same as we have evacuated our embassy in Libya, because we gave weapons and support to Islamists there in that country, as Pete Hoekstra talked about. This is not the right model. We have the right models before us. But also we have to be able to leverage our economic power, our diplomatic power, our informational power. When a president stands up and says ISIS is not Islamic, well, are they Southern Baptists? Are they Amish? Are they Mennonites? I mean, tell me what they are. Because if you do not understand and accept the ideology of your enemy, you're not going to be able to defeat that enemy. We need to have a dedicated information operation to defeat that ideology. But we also need to look at economically. How do we defeat the state sponsors of these Islamo-fascist terrorist groups that are out there, these jihadist groups, the Qatars, the Turkeys, the Irans, and to an extent, the Saudi Arabians who are supporting Wahhabism. If we don't cut away the resources and the funding, they will continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger. But even still, we have to be vigilant against your common state actors, such as a Russia, such as a China. As a matter of fact, Iran and China are right now, first time ever, joint naval exercises. So there are still modern-day threats that we have to be contending. So in closing, I want to say this. We cannot base our military strategy on budget constraints. Your military strategy has to be based upon the threat environment. The threat environment today is very dire. We should not have a United States military that right now is at post-World War I levels and some pre-World War II levels. That's a dangerous period. Thank you very much.